Before she died, Queen Elizabeth humiliated Camilla in the most shocking and deliberate way imaginable.
Before she passed away, Queen Elizabeth humiliated Camilla in the most shockingly deliberate way imaginable, and Camilla had her greedy eyes locked on one specific piece of royal jewellery. Those were the exact same pearls that once sat around Princess Diana's neck. Camilla wanted them, she made that crystal clear, but what the Queen did next stopped her dead. The Queen took those exact priceless pearls and placed them right around Catherine's neck, right in front of her rival. But that brutal public humiliation only made Camilla fight even harder. She pushed relentlessly for more demanding historic jewel after jewel, with a sheer desperation that absolutely shocked royal onlookers. And then the late Queen made her final decisive move. The very last major decision Her Majesty made before she passed was a move Camilla never saw coming. And even today she has never fully recovered from that brutal royal ambush. The exact second Catherine stepped inside that historic chapel, Camilla's entire world shattered. It was April 2021, and the grieving royal family had gathered at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle to bury Prince Philip. The entire world was watching live. Every camera, every journalist, and every royal family watcher on the planet had their eyes locked tightly on that solemn chapel. Members of the family filed in one by one, masked and isolated with grief, sitting incredibly heavy on every single face. And then Catherine finally walked in. Draped around her neck was a gorgeous four-strand pearl choker, luminous and absolutely perfect. If you knew even a little bit about royal history, your stomach would drop the second you saw it, because those were not just regular pearls. Those were Princess Diana's legendary pearls. This was the exact same pearl choker that Princess Diana wore back in November 1982 at the return banquet at Hampton Court Palace during the famous Dutch state visit, which made the entire world fall madly in love with her. They were the same iconic pearls that had been locked deep in a vault for nearly 20 years because nobody had been considered worthy enough to wear them again. Think about that for a second. Nearly 20 years sitting in a box completely untouched, just waiting. And Queen Elizabeth had just unlocked that secret box, placing those legendary pearls around Catherine's neck at her own husband's funeral, with literally every camera on earth pointed directly at the grieving royal family. Meanwhile, Camilla was forced to sit just a few feet away. She could not move an inch. She could not make a single solitary sound. Lenses from every corner of the world were sweeping across the family every few seconds, and virtually every eye on the planet was watching her. So she sat completely frozen, her back rigid, hands folded tight, and her face completely blank. And those white pearls glowed brilliantly under the chapel lights, while the whole world watched and felt the ghost of Princess Diana walk right back into that sacred room, right back into the empty seat next to Camilla. And there was absolutely nothing Camilla could do to stop it. Body language experts who studied the television footage later remarked that what they saw on Camilla's face was certainly not grief. Her jaw was locked completely tight. Her eyes were flat, cold, and hard. And in those brief moments when the broadcast cameras caught her at just the right angle, there was something dark flickering behind those eyes that had absolutely nothing to do with mourning Prince Philip. It looked like pure fury. It looked like the intense burning anger that a person has been sitting on for a very long time and is now suddenly being forced to swallow in front of the public. Camilla never once glanced directly at Catherine's neck. She did not need to do that. She already knew exactly what was sitting right there. She already knew precisely what it meant, and that knowledge was slowly destroying her from the inside. Queen Elizabeth II had personally approved and authorized every single item Catherine wore to that funeral, and she had chosen Diana's historic pearls deliberately, with Camilla sitting in the very same room at the most watched royal event in years. That was a message cold sharp and completely devastating. But here is what you truly need to understand. That tense moment in the chapel did not just come out of nowhere. The The Queen had been building toward it for years, quietly, methodically, one precious royal jewel at a time. And to understand what she was truly doing back then, you have to go right back to where it all started, back to 2005 when Camilla first walked through the palace doors as Prince Charles's wife and made a bold move that set the Queen's jaw like stone. The very moment Camilla married Prince Charles, she became legally entitled to be styled as the Princess of Wales. That was Diana's title, the crown she wore, and the name the entire world still ached over. And Camilla's team did something honestly disturbing. According to insider reports, her PR team aggressively pushed for Camilla to claim that title, and Camilla herself was actually overheard saying exactly what she thought about the matter. "I am the one who is actually here," she reportedly said. "I am the one standing right beside him. That title is far more befitting of me than anyone else." The palace inner circle was absolutely stunned by her demands, because this was not just a woman asking for a royal title. This was the woman who helped destroy Princess Diana's marriage, standing in the rubble of everything Diana lost, boldly asking to wear her name. The palace inner circle erupted in outrage. The Queen's response was swift and it was total. Camilla would be styled only as the Duchess of Cornwall. Absolutely nothing more, not one single syllable of Diana's title would ever pass to her, and that was the end of that chapter before it even properly began. But Camilla was far from finished. She was a senior working royal now, and she needed sparkling jewels for official state occasions. Fortunately, the royal vault was absolutely enormous. Centuries of priceless diamonds, shimmering pearls, deep emeralds and rubies sat resting in velvet-lined drawers, just waiting to be worn. Surely there was room for her inside all of that treasure. There was indeed, but the Queen was already drawing strict lines that Camilla could not yet see. Behind closed palace doors, the Queen's trusted personal dresser, Angela Kelly, the woman who physically controlled access to every single historic piece in that vault, began logging every request Camilla made. Every single item had to be approved in writing before it ever touched Camilla's skin. They framed it as simple standard protocol, but everyone who understood how that royal palace worked knew exactly what was going on. It was a tight leash, and Camilla was firmly on it. Instead, she was pointed toward the late Queen Mother's collection, the massive Beran honeycomb tiara, and those imposing multi-strand pearl chokers, fastened with enormous diamond clasps. And yes, those historic pieces were breathtaking, but the Queen had chosen them with cold precision, because those specific jewels belonged to a dead era. They were beautiful relics with no real heartbeat. They had no connection to the living future of the monarchy. The Queen was dressing Camilla in the ghosts of the past, keeping the future completely out of her hands. And Camilla had absolutely no idea it was even happening. Then 2011 arrived. Catherine married Prince William. The entire world watched her walk down the grand aisle at Westminster Abbey in a tiara borrowed directly from the Queen's personal collection, and the global reaction was overwhelming. Catherine was absolutely radiant. The public was completely captivated by her, and overnight something major shifted inside the cold palace walls. Sources close to Camilla say that the temperature changed almost immediately after that grand royal wedding. Camilla reportedly made it known through the right-back channels that as the wife of the future king, she believed she should always have seniority over Catherine when it came to selecting precious jewels for major state occasions. She demanded first access. She wanted the Queen to formally acknowledge her high rank through the jewelry vault. The Queen said nothing back, just complete silence, deliberate and total. But something was moving quietly in the background that Camilla knew absolutely nothing about. After Princess Diana passed away in 1997, that famous pearl choker had been placed right back in the vault, and the box was firmly shut. The Queen understood those pearls were far too painful and too deeply woven into the memory of Diana to just hand over to anyone. If the wrong woman wore them, it would have been a total catastrophe. So she kept that box locked tight, watching and waiting until she finally found someone she believed was worthy of carrying the massive weight of what those pearls represented without being completely destroyed by it. And in the months after Camilla made her move, dropping hints about wanting those precious royal jewels, that velvet box was quietly opened for the first time in nearly 20 years. The choker was cleaned, polished, and went straight around Catherine's neck. That was the Queen's very first strike, and it landed exactly where she aimed it. It was one carefully calculated moment that Camilla could never publicly challenge or recover from. But that was just the beginning, because the late Queen wasn't just holding back a single piece from Camilla. She was locking the entire future of the British monarchy away from her, handing it over piece by piece to Catherine. But the big question remains, did Camilla actually try to fight back? And what happened to her when she tried welcome to the Royal Vault War? The Queen never sat Camilla down, never looked her in the eye to explain herself, and never issued any formal decree. No, she spoke entirely through diamonds, and every time she opened that vault for Catherine and slammed it shut for Camilla, the silent message grew louder and darker. Now, to really grasp the massive weight of what was playing out inside that royal vault, you have to understand one crucial thing first. The royal jewellery collection isn't just some pile of expensive accessories. Every single historic piece carries memory, legacy, and deep meaning that stretches back through the centuries. And the most legendary pieces in there carry something even heavier. They actually carry the entire visual identity of the British monarchy itself. So when Queen Elizabeth decided who wore which piece, she wasn't just making simple fashion choices. She was actively choosing who the future belonged to, and her mind was already made up. In fact, the single most valuable item locked inside that entire royal vault is the stunning Nizam of Hyderabad necklace. It is an absolute Cartier masterpiece featuring geometric diamonds arranged with such flawless precision that the entire piece looks less like jewellery and more like wearable architecture. It was presented to the Queen as a wedding gift in 1947 by the ruler of Hyderabad, and she wore it in the historic defining portraits of her early reign. Those iconic portraits ended up on currency, on stamps, and inside history books across the world. That iconic necklace is far more than simple jewellery. It is the defining visual face of the Elizabethan era, itself the exact image people pictured when they envisioned a young, powerful, radiant queen. Camilla never got anywhere near reaching distance of it, and the Queen never explained her reasoning to anyone. She never had to. But those who watched the monarch closely understood the move completely. Camilla was never destined to be a long-reigning queen. She was much older, and she had married late into the royal family. Her eventual time as queen consort would always be relatively brief before the crown moved onward to William and Catherine. Camilla was a transitional figure, an important one absolutely, but transitional all the same. And you simply do not loan the most valuable, most historically significant necklace in the entire kingdom to a woman who is just passing through. Instead, you loan it to the woman who is going to be standing there in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years, carrying the heavy weight of the monarchy on her shoulders long after everyone else is gone. And that woman was Catherine. It had always been Catherine. So in 2014, the Queen officially authorised the loan of the legendary Nizam of Hyderabad necklace to Catherine for a high-profile gala. Catherine wore it, and the entire world saw it. And in that single glamorous evening, the Queen successfully transferred decades of visual prestige directly onto Catherine's shoulders, steering it completely away from Camilla. That visual message was not subtle, and it was certainly not accidental. The single most valuable piece in the vault, the very one that defined the Queen's own era and identity, now lived inside Catherine's story. Not Camilla's and not ever Camilla's, but Camilla doesn't just give up. Around this very same period, inside palace sources indicate that she became far more deliberate, far more calculated in her approach. She began openly admiring specific jewellery pieces in front of palace staff and even in front of the Queen herself. And then came the dramatic moment that tells you absolutely everything you need to know about how far Camilla was willing to push. During a private family gathering, Camilla directly and pointedly admired the Cambridge Pearl Brooch. Now, you really need to understand what this specific brooch actually represented before you can grasp why what happened next was so devastating. This wasn't just some piece worn at grand diplomatic receptions or televised events. This particular brooch was the Queen's constant daily companion. She wore it to televised Christmas broadcasts, to quiet daytime royal engagements, and to milestone portrait sittings across 7 long decades of her reign. It stood as one of the most recognisable symbols of her steady, constant, and totally unshakable presence. It was actually less a piece of jewellery and far more a piece of the Queen herself, and you won't believe what Camilla boldly did next. She quietly asked if she might wear it to an upcoming royal engagement. The Queen just smiled, said absolutely nothing, and the following year the unthinkable happened. That very brooch went straight to Catherine, and not for some grand state occasion or diplomatic reception, but for a portrait. William and Catherine's very first official joint portrait, unveiled in 2022. It became the most widely distributed, highly photographed image of the monarchy's next generation, and the iconic Cambridge Pearl Brooch sat right there on Catherine's chest, front and centre for the whole world to see. Camilla's request was never officially acknowledged. Not with a yes, not with a no, just completely and totally erased. It was answered in platinum and diamonds, publicly and permanently, in a portrait that would hang on walls for the next 100 years. Then there was Queen Alexandra's historic wedding necklace, and this piece carried a very specific kind of poison for Camilla. To fully understand why, you have to know what this stunning necklace actually represented. It was a magnificent diamond and pearl masterpiece given as a wedding gift to Queen Alexandra way back in 1863, and from that historical moment forward it became deeply and permanently tied to one major thing, the legendary Princess of Wales title. This was the very same title Camilla had been denied, the exact same title that still had Diana's name burned into every single syllable. When Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, passed away back in 2002, this necklace passed directly to her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, and she did something highly deliberate with it. She locked it straight away inside the royal vault and said absolutely nothing. The necklace simply disappeared behind heavily closed doors while Camilla attended state banquet after state banquet and formal reception after formal reception, year after grueling year. And that precious necklace never once came out for her until 2018, when Catherine wore it to a grand state banquet at Buckingham Palace. And yes, Camilla was sitting at that exact same banquet. Sit with that for a moment. The precious necklace tied directly to the Princess of Wales title. The title Camilla was denied, worn by Catherine, the actual Princess of Wales, at a formal state occasion in the exact same room as Camilla. The Queen did not need to utter a single word that night. Her breathtaking necklace screamed everything she had chosen never to say out loud. By this point, Camilla knew a major decision had been made completely without her. The royal vault was not being shared equally. It was being carefully directed, and that direction was always identical, flowing away from her and straight toward Catherine every single time. So she did something no one found surprising. She ran to Charles. Whether she pushed him directly or whether he saw the snub himself and decided to act, Charles began quietly advocating for Camilla to get much more visible recognition through jewellery access. He raised the issue with the Queen, and here is exactly what the Queen did. Every single time Charles pushed for Camilla, she elevated Catherine simultaneously. She handed Catherine something far bigger, something much more significant, something deeply historic. Every single time Charles took a step forward for Camilla, the Queen answered by planting Catherine even deeper into the legacy of the British monarchy. Camilla gained absolutely nothing, Catherine gained everything, and Charles learned very quickly and very painfully that this was a war he simply would not win against his own mother. But here is the major thing that Camilla still did not see coming. Because the grand necklaces and the most famous royal tiaras, those are the visible wounds. Those are the ones she could easily track and understand and at least make sense of. But the most truly devastating pieces were the ones nobody was talking about. The quiet ones, the highly private ones, the ones built from love, the ultimate personal blow. There are some jewels that speak to governments, and there are other jewels that speak directly to the heart. Queen Elizabeth II understood that difference completely, and she guarded that second kind far more fiercely than the first ones. Because those grand necklaces and the historic tiaras, those were all about power and legacy and the public image of the crown. But the quiet personal pieces, those were about something else entirely. Those pieces were about who the Queen trusted with her private self, who she truly believed deserved to carry not just her public image, but her actual life legacy forward. And this is precisely where Camilla's rejection stopped being political and started being deeply, permanently personal. The famous Cambridge Pearl Brooch already told a major part of that story. The late Queen wore it for over 7 decades. It represented her everyday self, her quiet and constant presence. When Camilla asked to wear it, and the Queen simply smiled and said nothing, and then gave it to Catherine for a portrait that would define the next generation, that was not just a simple denial of a jewel. That was the Queen looking closely at both women and making a definitive choice about who she actually trusted, who she actually wanted to carry her identity forward when she was gone. Camilla was simply not that woman, but absolutely nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, cuts quite as deep as the historic Edinburgh Wedding Bracelet. And to fully understand why this piece is so devastating, you must understand where it came from before you can grasp what it meant that Catherine got it and Camilla never did. This bracelet is relatively modest by royal standards. Elegant platinum set with diamonds, not grand, not theatrical, not the kind of piece that makes major headlines at a state banquet, but the tragic story behind those diamonds will completely hollow you out if you let yourself feel it properly. Prince Philip's own mother was Princess Alice, and her life remains one of the most heartbreaking tragic stories in the entire history of the royal family. She had been declared mentally ill by doctors who did not understand her. She was forcibly separated from her young children and institutionalized completely against her will. She lost almost everything she ever owned. She eventually gave up all her worldly possessions entirely and spent her final years living inside Buckingham Palace, wearing a simple nun's habit because she decided the material world had nothing left to offer her. Philip grew up intimately knowing what his mother had suffered, knowing exactly what she had lost, knowing the deep kind of pain that gets quietly buried inside royal families and never spoken about out loud to anyone. And when he was about to marry the young woman who would eventually become Queen Elizabeth II, he took his mother's tiara apart, dismantled it completely, and had those precious diamonds reset into a bracelet, a wedding gift for his bride. He was giving his bride the most precious thing he had in the entire world, a piece of his broken, complicated, deeply loved mother, a piece of his own history and his own grief, transformed into something beautiful she could carry with her every single day. The late Queen wore that sacred bracelet for 73 years, and when she finally decided to share it, she gave it directly to Catherine, not Camilla. Think about what that decision actually means. This was the most intimate object the Queen owned, the physical embodiment of her marriage, a precious piece born from a mother's immense suffering and a husband's love, given by a young prince to the woman he was choosing to spend his entire life with. The Queen looked at every single woman in that royal family and decided that the only person worthy of holding that precious history, of wearing that deep love on her wrist, was Catherine. Camilla had been by Charles's side for decades. She was legally his wife, sat at the same grand tables, attended the same high-profile events, and carried the exact same senior royal title. And the Queen looked at all of that and still firmly said no. The legendary bracelet goes to Catherine, and here is the part that makes this situation even darker. There were absolutely no written instructions left behind. The Queen never left a single formal decree about any of these historic pieces. She never sat down and documented her personal intentions or signed anything official. Angela Kelly managed the vault access, and certain items were simply understood, known by everyone inside those palace walls, without ever being stated out loud. The designated jewellery pieces for Catherine were never a secret. They were part of a system quietly built over many years, communicated entirely through deliberate action and completely impossible to challenge, simply because nothing was ever officially written down in any logbook, which meant Camilla could never fight it. You cannot go to court over a historic brooch that was never formally promised to you, or a priceless bracelet handed over without a single word of documentation. The Queen had carefully built a massive wall around Catherine that had absolutely no doors, no windows, and no weak points anywhere. Camilla could see straight through it. She just could not break through it, not even a single inch. And then, on September 8th, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II took her very last breath at Balmoral Castle, and every single lock in that royal vault changed hands overnight. Camilla, who had been shut out, managed, redirected, silenced, and systematically denied for 17 long years, suddenly had access to everything. So what did Camilla actually do with it? She burned it all down. This is the shocking aftermath. The Queen was barely cold when Camilla made her dramatic move. She now enjoyed full, unrestricted access to one of the greatest, most valuable jewellery collections in human history. 70 years of the Queen's deliberate and careful architectural curation sat in velvet-lined drawers waiting to be claimed, and Camilla held the key to every single one of those drawers. Her first major power move was the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara. Now you have to realize what this tiara actually represents to understand why wearing it was such a massive statement. The piece is staggering, absolutely imposing on every level. It is built around a single emerald weighing 93.7 carats, surrounded by a delicate platinum lattice of diamonds, framing it like a throne. Crafted back in 1919, it finally passed into the royal vaults in 1942, when a prominent society hostess named Dame Margaret Greville left her whole jewellery collection to the Queen Mother. The tiara came with it, and then it essentially vanished from public view. For 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II kept it completely locked away in the dark, not because it lacked beauty, but because that piece was incredibly dangerous. This historic tiara was actually acquired during the bloody, highly chaotic aftermath of the Russian Revolution, leaving its origins murky in the exact way that makes modern diplomats very nervous. The late Queen understood perfectly well that a reigning monarch wearing this piece on the international stage would spark deeply uncomfortable questions about the bloody, dark history of how these aristocratic treasures changed hands back then. Questions the monarchy absolutely could not afford to answer, so she kept it locked away and left it there. The only time she ever permitted the piece to be worn was when she loaned it to Princess Ujani for her 2018 wedding, a private family event safely far from any geopolitical scrutiny. But Camilla wore it to a major diplomatic reception at Windsor Castle in late 2025. She was screaming a message with every single diamond on that crown. The old rules are dead. I am in charge now, and I have total access to everything that was once kept from me. Watch me reclaim it all. And the entire world certainly did watch, just not in the exact way she was hoping. Within hours, royal analysts and diplomatic experts began asking the exact questions the Queen had spent 70 years trying so hard to avoid: the murky provenance, the violent revolutionary origins, and those highly uncomfortable questions about aristocratic wealth and where it actually came from. That protective shield of careful mystery the Queen had maintained for 7 decades dissolved in a single evening. Camilla had not triumphantly brought a long-forgotten masterpiece back into the spotlight. Instead, she had accidentally demolished the wall the Queen had carefully built around it, letting every uncomfortable question flood straight in. But she was far from finished. In March 2026, the Nigerian president visited Britain for an official state banquet. Camilla showed up wearing the late Queen's personal Cartier bracelets stacked high on her wrists. These were pieces Elizabeth had worn as subtle, everyday staples rather than grand statements, and resting above them was a towering sapphire tiara that absolutely dominated the room. She was displaying every single piece like a hard-won trophy, like a conquest, like someone who had finally broken into a room they had been locked out of for decades, and she desperately wanted every single person in that room to see exactly what was inside. And then Catherine arrived. She wore exactly one tiara, just a single piece, the iconic lover's knot. Now you really have to feel the absolute weight of what that tiara represented in that crowded room on that specific night. The famous lover's knot tiara was commissioned by Queen Mary back in 1913, and it is certainly not a light or delicate piece. Built from brilliant cut diamonds and 19 hanging pearls set in silver and gold, the piece is known for being notoriously, almost punishingly heavy. Princess Diana wore it often and admitted it gave her headaches so severe that she could barely get through an evening. Yet she kept wearing it regardless because it became her signature, her personal crown. It was the one piece that made her look exactly like who she was. The Queen had made absolutely sure that this historic tiara went directly to Catherine, because handing it to any other person, and especially handing it to Camilla, would have been a catastrophic misreading of everything the public still felt about Diana. By ensuring Catherine became its rightful keeper, the Queen allowed this legendary tiara to shine once again. She allowed the piece to carry Diana's legacy forward without it being poisoned by the deeply complicated and painful history of the 1990s. So when Catherine walked into that banquet wearing it, she didn't need to stack anything at all. She didn't need to flash her conquests, announce her royal access, or pile on carrots just to make her presence felt. She simply glided in, and the lover's knot sat on her head, as if it had always lived there, like it was waiting for her, almost as if Diana herself had placed it there. Every single camera in that grand room immediately turned away from Camilla. It wasn't because Catherine had more diamonds, she actually had fewer, but because when Catherine walked in wearing the lover's knot, the room truly felt something. It felt the heavy weight of Diana's memory, the Queen's deliberate endorsement, and 17 full years of quiet, patient, and unshakable grace, all arriving in that room at exactly the same time. Camilla had far more jewels draped on her body than Catherine. She had more carats, more pieces, and more raw access to the palace vault than she had ever had in her entire life. And yet she lost the room completely, totally, and instantly, without a single word ever being exchanged. Because here is the real truth that this entire story has been building toward. There was one thing Camilla could never get from that vault, not even with the Queen being completely gone. Not even with total unrestricted access to every single drawer, every velvet box, and every locked case inside Buckingham Palace. She simply could not get the late Queen's endorsement. She could not get that private, unspoken trust. She could not get the brooch passed over with a quiet, knowing smile. She could not get the bracelet built from a dead mother's tiara. She could never get the pearl choker fastened deliberately around her neck, while the whole world watched and felt Diana's ghost fill the room. And now here is the darkest part of this entire story. Because as Queen Consort, Camilla does have the legal authority to demand the very pieces Catherine currently holds. There is absolutely no formal written designation protecting Catherine's access to them. No official royal decree, no signed document. The late Queen never wrote any of it down. Which means that technically, right at this very moment, Camilla could demand the lover's knot back. She could ask for the pearl choker, and she could demand the Edinburgh Wedding Bracelet. And there is absolutely nothing on paper to stop her from doing so. But she won't. Deep down, she knows exactly why she won't. Because taking those pieces from Catherine would never give Camilla the Queen's legacy. It would not magically grant her the endorsement, the private trust, or the grace that those historic jewels now carry. It would simply prove to the entire watching world that she is exactly the kind of woman who reaches for things that were never truly meant for her, and she has already learned that hard lesson. She learned it slowly, painfully, and highly publicly over 17 long years. She truly learned that lesson in a quiet funeral chapel with Diana's pearls glowing around Catherine's neck only a few feet away. It hit her during the heavy silence, right after she asked for a brooch, and the Queen just smiled. She also learned it at a lavish state banquet, stacking every diamond trophy on her wrists, only to lose the entire room to a rival wearing a single, simple tiara. Now the old Queen is gone. The royal vault stands wide open, and Camilla finally holds every treasure she was denied for nearly 20 years. Yet she still lost because those dazzling jewels were never actually about the physical diamonds. They were about what Queen Elizabeth II saw in these two very different women, one she trusted completely with her marriage, her memories, and her private self. One was handed the monarch's most intimate personal possessions without a single word of explanation, because absolutely no explanation was ever needed. Meanwhile, the other was dressed appropriately adorned, sufficiently provided for grandly, and kept at a careful, deliberate, and very permanent distance. Those glittering diamonds will outlast all of them, sitting cold and unchanged inside their velvet boxes long after every woman in this royal drama is gone. But the light they cast will always depend entirely on the character of the woman wearing them. And Queen Elizabeth II decided who that chosen woman was a very long time ago.